Austin, let me know when you are connected via audio, okay? Hey, Grady. How are you? Good. How you doing?
Doing really good.
Yeah?
Yeah, can't complain.
Good.
No sales yet. You know, it's only been 3 weeks, but
So here's the deal. When I started, I didn't have a sale for 6 months, not to scare you.
yeah, that's
But
my mom said the same thing.
well, and you just gotta keep doing the stuff, doing the open houses, doing whatever it is that works for you, and you'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Because there's about 100 different ways you can lead generate, but you can't do all of them well. So
Right.
figure out what works best for you.
Sure.
I found out pretty quickly that open houses were a good place for me to get in touch with people, and that's what I've tried to do really well. So anyway, worked for me.
Yeah,
So,
I've done 2 so far, but that's not enough. Not yet.
Yeah, no, you just keep doing this stuff. Send out things via Facebook. Facebook's a great marketing tool.
I need to get better at that.
Well, I guess if you can do a different social media platform really well. I cannot do Instagram. Like my kids think I'm an idiot, but it's all good. So social media is a huge tool that, if you can use. Hey, Austin, are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, good. Are you ready to get going?
I'm ready to rock.
Okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to write up a purchase agreement. So when you're sitting down with a buyer, there's a few things that you have to know so that you can go back to the office, punch in the information. So here's what you're going to ask. What are we going to offer? So get a pen and paper, and we're going to make a few notes so that when we have that purchase agreement in front of us, we can just plug things in, okay? So Grady's got his pen. Austin, you ready with a pen and paper?
I'm ready.
Okay, here's what we're going to do. Jot down conventional loan.
Say that one more time.
Jot this down. Conventional. That's the kind of loan they're going to get. 200,000. That's our offer price. 1,000 earnest money. So 1,000 EM. 3% down. Yes, inspection. Yes, closing costs, and I'll tell you what that means in a minute. Yes, home warranty. And I'm going to be the listing agent. So this is going to be a dual agency situation. So I'm basically creating terms that are going to have you hit as many parts on that purchase agreement as possible. So we're not going to do everything. So when you get a purchase agreement that's like, wait, this is a VA loan, then hook up with me again and I'll kind of walk you through that. But for right now, let's do the basic purchase agreement and go from there. So we're going to do the screen share. Okay, so just give me a second here. Just when you think you have this thing all rolling, I want this. Now, how do I screen share that? Let me try this again. I apologize, you guys.
No, it's fine. Hey, I do have a question though.
Yeah, ask away.
Doesn't it have to be at least 90% or 10% down?
Does what need to be 90%?
Does it have to be 10% down for a conventional?
Oh, conventional loan, okay, let me see. Oh yeah, there we go. Conventional loan can be as low as 3% down.
It can, okay.
FHA is 3.5%. And then VA can be as much as 0 down.
Yeah.
So every lender is going to have a few different programs. So if someone says, how much do I need down? Typically, there's programs where you can put $1,000 down, Minnesota Housing. But for right now, we're going to stick with just the kind of the bare bones, nothing frilly, nothing fancy, okay?
Sure.
So everyone has their purchase agreement. Can you see what I see? Can you see the purchase agreement here?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to try and get rid of all these pictures of us. Okay. If at any point you guys, you have a question, just reach out, okay? Just interrupt me and we'll go from there. So for right now, or if you can't see what I'm seeing for some reason, let me know. So purchase agreement in front of you. So obviously, you're going to fill in the date. And just so you know, there are ways to do this in Transaction Desk where you can go in and I'm going to see if I can do this with you looking at me. If this was a real transaction, I would show you how to put the details in this, this kind of page. It's in the details tab of your transaction. But and that's kind of a broadened class. But for right now, we're just going to talk about if we had a blank purchase agreement, how do we fill that out? So know that there's ways to do this electronically, but for right now, we're going to worry just about this. Okay, can you see the purchase agreement on your screen?
Yeah.
I got it.
Okay, perfect. So obviously the date and the buyers. So you're going to want to use their legal names. And when I put buyers in here, let's go. Joe Blow is the buyer. And he's going to be buying with Susie Q. Okay, these are our two buyers, okay? So I always show them, I say, did I spell your names correctly? Because that's really important. Okay, buyer's earnest money in the amount of, what are we going to put here?
$1,000.
Yeah. So the neat thing is if you put 1,000 here, then the words automatically transfer over there, okay? So it says the $1,000, line 7, shall be delivered to the listing broker. And that's typically what happens, you guys, where the listing broker holds the earnest money, okay? So now you guys are writing a purchase agreement on my property, so it's dual agency. So obviously the $1,000 will get to the listing broker, or if checked to, and then sometimes, so let's say you have a buyer who's purchasing a for sale by owner. Well, they don't have an escrow account to hold earnest money. So that's where you might want to check that box and say, why doesn't our brokerage hold the earnest money? Okay, so that doesn't happen very often, but so typically we'll leave it as shall be delivered to the listing broker no later than 2 business days after final acceptance of this purchase agreement. So you have this purchase agreement all gets signed off. We have a final acceptance day of today. You now have 2 business days to get this into the brokerage or to initiate the trust funds. That takes a few extra days. And then line 9 says they have 3 business days of receipt of the earnest money or final acceptance date, whichever is later, to cash it. So once your brokerage has the earnest money, they have 3 days where they can cash it, okay? Line 11, said earnest money is part payment for the purchase of the property located at, and then this is your street address. And I'm not gonna fill in all the rest. Can you see when I'm typing things in there?
Yeah.
Yep, okay, good. So city of, county of, this will all get auto-populated, you guys, when you're writing a purchase agreement and you're pulling up a listing from the MLS. But like I say, we're not going to worry about the nuts and bolts of that for right now. So we put the street address in, we scroll down, and so line 30 talks about anything that's going to stay with the property. Okay, so if you look up to like line 20, 21, 19 even, we're talking about anything that's fixed, kind of like when you took your exam, anything that's screwed in or fixed. So like, this is important on line 18, window shades and blinds, traverses, curtains and drapery rods, valances, draperies, curtains, and window coverings. So we have it in the purchase agreement that those things all stay. So when you're working with your buyer, you're going to say, look, all these window treatments stay with the home. If you're working with a seller, you want to let them know that as written, all your window coverings are going to stay with the home unless you make a specific comment in the agent remarks saying window coverings in dining room are not part of this purchase agreement or something to that effect, okay? So I'll tell you something that I did wrong on one of my very first deals. The washer and the dryer, per the MLS listing, we're supposed to stay with the home. I did not write washer and dryer in the purchase agreement. Then we get to our final walkthrough and there's no washer and dryer. And I called the agent and I said, hey, where did the washer and dryer go? You said you were leaving it. And he said, you didn't tell me you wanted it, so we sold it. So now I'm like, oh, that stinks, right? So I always go back and put the things in here that are actually staying, that aren't fixed in. Because if you look on line 24, any of the following built-ins, the dishwasher, refrigerator, wine and beverage refrigerators, all of those, you know, the stove, things like that are listed that they're going to stay. There's nothing in here that talks about a washer and dryer, okay? So washer and dryer as, as seen on, and then here you're going to put the date that you go to see the property. So 8/18/2020. Let's say we just looked at it today. Because what you don't want is they have a beautiful washer and dryer and then they swap it out with some junker, right? You said you wanted a washer and dryer, you're getting one. We want to make sure we have the washer and dryer that we saw the day we came to look at the place. Okay, make sense? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So line 33, 32 and 33, is there anything excluded from the purchase? Like someone might go, okay, there's a junky old shed in the backyard, which typically would stay. Shed, but I don't want to deal with that junky old shed. Backyard. We're saying we do not want to purchase a property with that junky old shed in the backyard, okay? So that's where we would put something like that in. Or you might want to go hot tub if they say the hot tub is included. We're saying I do not want to purchase the hot tub, okay? That's where you would put those kind of things. All right. Now, line 34, purchase price. Line 35, what was our purchase price going to be?
200,000.
Yep. And so how much are we putting down, did we say, of cash?
3%.
3%. So
6,000.
3% is cash. So mortgage financing would be, now these two have to add up to 100. So what would mortgage financing be?
97.
97, you got it. So always double check. Sometimes it's tricky when, let's say you have a FHA where it's 3.5, then this would be 96.5, okay? So you just kind of got to do the math. But for right now, we're going 3 and 97. Line 3, nothing is assumable. Line 4, there's no contract for deed. Close date. Okay, so let's go about 45 days out on this one, okay? So we're on the 18th. Here's something that I'll tell you. I don't like to close on a Monday or a Friday. In case anything comes up, it doesn't give you any wiggle room to solve any problems and give yourself an extra day, right? So let's say you close on a Friday, something goes a little bit sideways and the lender can't get things straightened out. Now everybody's waiting till the following Monday, but everyone's sitting with moving trucks loaded, right? So that's a bad deal. So let's say we want to close on let's go the 24th. Okay, it's a Thursday. I like closing on Thursdays. Okay? So just tuck that little tidbit into your brain for when you're dealing with setting a close date. Okay. The next section, we get to line 49 and on, mortgage financing. So if you have a cash deal, this doesn't apply. But for where we are now, because we have a conventional loan, we do it this way. Line 50, the purchase agreement is subject to mortgage financing provisions below. Okay, so line 51, mortgage financing section below. If is not, you proceed to the next section, but we have to do this. So this section 54 to 63, we have to say, how are we going to finance this thing? Line 54, you check. It's a first mortgage, not the first you've ever had, but in order of payment. Let's say you have 3 mortgages on your house. This jumps up to the place of prominence where this gets drawn from first. So it's a first mortgage. If you have a Minnesota housing, for instance, then you would add some subordinate financing, but we don't have that. We just have a straight conventional loan. Line 55, financing does or does not include a bond program. Typically with conventional, it does not include a grant or bond program. Again, that's a specific type of loan. So which box do we check down here, 58 to 63?
Conventional.
Yep, check conventional. And we're going to go down 64. So we're amortizing this loan over a period of, typically it's 30 years unless someone wants a 15-year loan. So 30 years with an interest rate at no more than, now typically we'll say market rate. Some people will say, look, the financing of this place will work for me as long as the interest rates stay under 4%. If that's the case, and you would talk to their lender to find out how tight those numbers are, you may want to put 4% interest rate, no more than 4%. Okay, so that just depends on their situation. But before you write this purchase agreement, you're going to call the lender and say, hey, I'm writing a purchase agreement for Joe Blow and Susie Q. And I just want to make sure I'm understanding their financial situation, because sometimes they're like, oh yeah, we're putting 10% down. And then you call the lender and they say, nope, they're putting 3% down because they're going to need money for XYZ. Okay, so always connect with that lender. One of the other questions you're going to ask the lender is, how long is it going to take you to close? How many days do you need? So if they say, hey, we can get it done in 30 days, once the inspection is done, or they might say, hey, if you can get the inspection done quickly, we can still close in 30 days. They might say, we're slammed, we need 45 days. So sometimes that, that term of this agreement is dependent on what the lender can do. Does that make sense? Yes?
Yes.
Got it. Makes sense.
Okay, okay, perfect. So to be made, line 66, the mortgage application is to be made within 5 days. So this is a lender thing. They take care of that. You don't need to worry about that. Line 69, mortgage financing contingency. So basically what we're saying here is if the mortgage piece falls through, then we refund the earnest money back to the buyer. So when you're representing the buyer, you're going to check line 71. If buyer cannot secure the financing specified in this purchase agreement, then line 74, earnest money gets refunded to the buyer. So a situation like this is, let's say, and this just happened, Mayo Clinic furloughs your buyer. Well, now they've got less hours and less pay. They may not qualify for a loan anymore, right? This covers them and says if the wheels fall off the bus of their financing and they can no longer qualify for this mortgage, line 74 says then that earnest money gets refunded to the buyer. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So you may also check line 77, not 71 and 77. Typically it's one or the other. So line 77, if I'm representing a buyer, I'm going to do 71. When I represent a seller, I might come back and say, well, what I would like you to do is provide a written statement, like it says on line 77, and this comes from the lender on or before. Okay, so a situation where you would use this, if you have a closed period that's pretty far out, like 60 days out, and you want to make sure that in a reasonable amount of time, I want to know that these guys are clear to close. Okay, instead of waiting 3 days before closing, I might specify, okay, I want the lender to give this written notice a few days before closing. But in our case, let me clear that. In our case, we are closing like between 30 and 45 days out. So I typically wouldn't do this. The written statement says that the lender is pretty much guaranteeing that this loan is ready to go through. If it doesn't, then it's on the lender, but you also forfeit your earnest money as a buyer, okay? So you can read through that, but typically if you're writing for a buyer, you're gonna want lines 71 and 74, okay? You're protecting your buyer, okay? Let's scroll down to line 113. When should these guys lock in their interest rate? And again, it's required by the lender anytime prior to closing or as required by the lender, okay? Line 117, lender commitment work orders. So sometimes, especially if it's an FHA loan, that typically means the people are buying, maybe more of a fixer-upper. So an appraiser might come through and go, oh, I don't like the peeling paint on that house. I would like you to get that fixed prior to us okaying your loan. So as you're going around the house with a buyer, you're going to want to be going, okay, if they have an FHA loan, the appraiser is going to call out a few more of those safety structure things. But you guys have a conventional loan. Almost nothing gets called out on a conventional loan. So typically with this, if you feel like there's a whole bunch of things that need to be fixed before the lender will write off on this loan, you might want to put like $100 here, okay? But typically with a conventional, I'm going to put 0. We're not asking the seller to contribute to anything that the lender calls out, because typically the lender won't call anything out on a conventional loan. Okay, any questions about that?
No.
Okay, line 126, who's going to pay in case that appraiser needs to come back and make sure the work has been done? Almost always we say buyer pays, but because it's a conventional loan again, the chances of that appraiser having to come back, and it's not a whole reappraisal, it just says I need to come back and check and make sure that you scrape that peeling paint that you said you would, and then I can write off on this. So, but typically the buyer would pay a reinspection fee. Okay, line 127, this is FHA. We do not have an FHA loan, so we're going to scroll down. Line 139, FHA and DVA, that's a veteran loan. We don't have any of those, so we're not going to worry about this. The next thing we have to worry about is line 157. Now, we said yes on closing costs. So we are going to ask the seller to pay some of our closing costs, okay? So the seller is contributing to the buyer's cost. So we either have to put a dollar amount or a percentage, okay? You're not going to do both. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask them to contribute 3% of the sale price, okay? By doing that, if we're offering $200,000 and we're asking them to contribute 3%, that's $6,000, what are we actually offering them?
194.
Yep, exactly. So in a case like this, where your buyer needs the closing costs, they're a first-time buyer, they've got enough money saved up to put the down payment down, but they don't have the extra $6,000 sitting around to pay for closing costs. So they're going to ask the seller to contribute that. Now, the seller may come back and say, nope, not going to do it. Change your offer. One of the ways to make this work and still have the seller pay closing costs is to make your offer 206, ask them to pay the 3%, then the seller is still getting the $200,000 that he wants to get out of his home. Does that make sense?
What if it only appraises for 200,000? They still have to make up that amount.
Yeah, then you come back to the table and you talk through it. But I'm just saying you can roll those closing costs in to the loan amount by offering more, and then the seller will still pay them. So that is the question you asked, though, because this house still has to appraise, right? So that is the question you ask, and what I would do if that was you guys is run it by one of us who's done this a few times and say, hey, can you take a look at this house? We're thinking of offering over asking price. Do you think it would appraise? And we'll help you out with that, okay? Yeah, good?
Yes.
All right. Yes, good. Line 168, inspections. Now, were we going to have an inspection on this place?
Yes.
Yes, buyer elects to have an inspection. Line 171, this purchase agreement is contingent upon any inspections. So you're going to tell your buyer, look, we can have an inspection, and if there's something you are not comfortable with, you can get out of the deal and you get your earnest money back, okay? So line 178, seller does not agree to allow buyer to perform intrusive testing. So basically we say this is a non-intrusive inspection. So we're not going to be knocking a hole in their wall to find out if there's a dead mouse in there or something, right? So it's non-intrusive. So you scroll down to the next page, line 184. We have to specify how many days it's going to take us to get this inspection done, because remember, this is a contingency. So until we've got the inspection and negotiations all wrapped up, that sold sign does not get hung yet, okay? So we have to say how many days it's going to take us to get our inspection done. So I know that there's an inspector I can get to go in there this week. So we're going to knock that down to 7 to make our offer a little stronger. Because think about it, if you're the seller, as long as you've got those inspection contingency days, your house isn't sold yet, right? There's still an opportunity for the buyer to back out. So this is where we specify how many days is it going to take for us to get this done. Now notice this is calendar days, okay? It's not business days, which makes it easier. This used to say business days, and then you'd be like, okay, so you've got holidays in the middle of this time frame, and it got to be really confusing as to when is the actual drop dead date of us needing to get these inspections done. So within 7 calendar days of final acceptance. So that means if final acceptance is today, day 1 is tomorrow, okay? It always starts the day after final acceptance. So all inspections, tests, and resulting negotiations, if any, shall be done. So now, let's say you get your inspection on day 3, you have up until day 7 to negotiate anything you want fixed with that seller. Now, let's say you get to day 7 and it's night and we still haven't come to agreement. You can write a quick amendment extending those calendar days, okay? If that time frame runs out, now let's say you've got the buyer here. What if you go, okay, you did the inspection, the buyer wanted to fix a few things or have the seller fix a few things, but you never got the amendment to the listing agent before those 7 days were up. Now you have just bought the property as is, okay? It's on the buyer to make sure that you have all inspections buttoned up within those 7 calendar days or whatever time period you are specifying on line 184, okay? That is a very important number right there, okay? Any other questions? No. Okay, line 197, 198, 199. We're going to check box 1, 2, or 3 in this section. Does the buyer have a property to sell? And we're going to say no, they don't. They've been renting. So we don't need number 1. There's no addendum sale of buyer's property. There's no number 2. So number 1 is if they don't have their house on the market yet. And we want to make an offer contingent upon them selling their home. Okay, we're not in that situation. Number 2, this purchase agreement is contingent upon successful close, which means the buyers have a purchase agreement on their house. It just has to close in order for your buyer to purchase their next place. But we're going to check box 3. Buyer represents that the buyer has the financial ability to perform on this purchase agreement without the sale and closing of any other property. Okay? It's the nice thing about when people are renting. You don't have to line up another sale to make sure yours goes through. Okay, line 213 and on, real estate taxes and special assessments. We prorate our taxes. So basically, the person who owns the home pays taxes up until the day of closing. Your buyer is going to pay taxes from the day of closing on. So the title company does a per diem on those taxes, and that comes out in the final numbers. So we prorate line 216, prorate 218, line 220, if the property tax status is part or non-homestead classification in the year of closing, the seller shall pay the difference. We put all of those things on the seller, okay? If there's anything that needs to get paid at closing, because then you get to this page, 226, this is the deferred taxes and special assessments. Notice that every one of these is checked seller shall pay, seller shall pay. So we make sure that if there's any special assessments, if there's anything extra, deferred taxes, any of those kind of things, we say that the seller takes care of those before closing, okay? Versus buyer shall assume. So seller shall pay all of these. Line 240, as of the date of this purchase agreement, the seller represents that the seller has not received notice regarding any new improvement projects from any assessing authorities. How do you know this? Because you're obviously writing this purchase agreement for the buyer. This is a question in the seller's disclosure. So if you look through the seller's disclosure, that's how you're going to know whether there are any special assessments or not. One of the other things to know that too is you can get on Olmsted County if it's a Rochester property and go to the tax information. It'll tell you if there's any special assessments pending on that property. Okay? We're going to keep scrolling down. 251, are there any previously written purchase agreements that we have to cancel in order for this purchase agreement to rule? So basically, if you have a buyer and they wrote a purchase agreement on place A and then they found place B and they like B better than A, well, then they're going to have to cancel the purchase agreement on A in order to buy B. But again, we've been renting and we did not write any purchase agreement. So the purchase agreement is not subject to any cancellation of a previously written purchase agreement. All right, line 257 and 8, marketable title. So basically the title company, when they transfer ownership, the tool they use is a warranty deed. These other types of deeds are for some very non-normal transactions. 9.5 out of 10 times you're going to be asking for this warranty deed, okay? The rest you don't need to worry about on a normal transaction. Line 270, when can you have possession? Immediately after closing. So when a buyer says, hey, can I just move my stuff into the garage? The house is vacant anyway. Absolutely not without permission, okay? So that is something that needs to get signed if the seller allows you to do that. But it's really important for them to know you don't have possession until you sign the closing documents and I hand you over the key, okay? I'm gonna let you read things about linked devices. So there's so many things that can happen through an app these days. Obviously a seller has to close off those accounts and make sure that they can no longer be, opening the new buyer's garage door from across town or, turning their lights on and off or anything like that. So you got to make sure that those things get disabled. Prorations, everything gets prorated, like our taxes, if there's any homeowner association dues, things like that, those things get prorated. The rest, again, is things that the title company is taking care of, title issues. I'm going to let you read through these. I'm going to show you line 360. Basically, this says, yes, I'm acknowledging that I have had an opportunity to read the disclosure statement, seller's property disclosure statement, okay? Or if it's the not totally filled out one, it would be the disclosure alternative. If you get one of those, you call me or another agent and I'm gonna walk you through that. It's a little bit trickier. So this just acknowledges we've seen the seller's property disclosure statement. Okay, scrolling down, this whole box 370 on talks about is it city water, city sewer. So 372, yes, city sewer. Yes, city water. Is there a septic field? Seller does not know of a septic, subsurface sewage treatment system, okay? Serving the property. Private well, seller does not know of a well on or serving the property. Don't assume that just because the house is in town that there's not some old well sitting on the property. If the seller knows that there's a well, then they have to tell you and that'll be disclosed. But so just be careful which one you check here. This purchase agreement is not subject to this addendum talking about sewage systems and wells, okay? If you're listing a place or buying a place out in the country, this is a whole different deal. But for where we're buying right now, we're good. Okay, 386, home protection. Were we gonna ask for a home warranty?
Yes.
Yes. So line 389, a home warranty plan will be obtained by, now, you guys are representing the buyer, so it's gonna be obtained by the buyer, but it's gonna be paid for by the seller, okay? So this allows you to choose whichever policy you want, whichever company you wanna go through, but the seller's gonna pay for it. And you might say, hey, I want an HWA home warranty, okay? At a cost not to exceed $499. So the seller knows how much you're asking. It's about a $500 ask for this home warranty, okay? So we're gonna uncheck this. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so this next box, 394, this is where we say who's representing whom, okay? So obviously, who's gonna represent the buyer? Which of you guys wants to be the agent?
I will.
Is that Austin?
Grady.
Grady? Can't hear who's doing. So Grady, and you're going to do Keller Williams. Ooh, that's not Williams Premier Realty. So you are the buyer's agent. I am the seller's agent. Now, did I do that correctly?
No.
Given what the options are here.
Oh,
Dual
dual agent.
agent.
Dual agency, you got it. So that's really important because then we get to this next box on 403. Does dual agency apply? It does apply in this transaction. So if we're doing a deal together, you guys, now both you and I are working at facilitating the nuts and bolts of this transaction. So it really limits how much I can represent my seller. It really limits how much you can represent your buyer. So you can say, hey, like let's say it's the inspection. They want an inspection. And then they say to you, what do you think I should do? What would you ask for? Well, we're in dual agency. So now you can't negotiate to the detriment of the other party. So you can say, look, you definitely can ask for things. Let's talk through what's important to you. What would you like the seller to take care of? What are things you can take care of yourself? I call those Saturday do it list things, okay? No longer can I say, this is what I think you should ask for. You can say, I would think about it this way, but that decision is yours, okay? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So everybody has to agree to dual agency. So if we check, yes, dual agency does apply, then everyone needs to sign here, the buyer and the seller. If you're in a place where dual agency does not apply, you do not have to do any of this bottom part, but dual agency does apply. So we have to have everybody sign off and understand that like number 3 says, with the limits of dual agency, the broker and its salespersons will work diligently to facilitate the mechanics of the sale. Okay. So the rest I'm going to let you read, but then we get to the end, line 471. Is there anything we need to add to this? There is, let's say the house is built before 1978. So then we need to make sure there's this disclosure, lead-based paint disclosure. Okay, so let's pretend that that has to come in. But otherwise, you just check whatever, anything else that applies here. If you're doing a common interest community, then that 475 you would check. So for right now, 478. Now, we keep scrolling down line 490. You obviously, you're offering, you're submitting an offer. So you don't know yet if there's going to be a counter offer, okay? So you're not going to do anything with 490, okay? And then this 493, 494, this is the seller a foreign person? This is not an immigration question. So one time I was sitting down with sellers, he was white and she was Mexican, and I asked this question. And you could tell, like, there's like, why the heck are you asking this? And I quickly said, this isn't an immigration question, because I don't care, right? Like, that's not what I'm here for. This is a tax question. So if you are not a legal citizen or here with the correct documentation, then there would be tax withholdings for them. Like me, I'm Canadian, but I'm a resident alien. Okay, if someone's a non-resident alien, then this would be is not a foreign person. So this question also is on the disclosure. Okay, so you know that the seller is not a foreign person, so there's no tax withholdings that need to be checked on that one. And again, so title kind of gets their flag up in case they need to withhold some taxes. So if your buyer is all okay with the terms written in the agreement, the buyer would sign. Buyer's printed name would be here. So this would be Joe Blow. Marital status. Why do you think they ask marital status? Who cares?
if it's for the seller, there's 2 to sign.
Yep, and title company too. It takes 1 to buy, 2 to sell in Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
So Joe Blow needs to sign. We know he's married. The title company will then go, oh yeah, okay, we know there's another person involved. So let's make sure we get the correct signatures. And Susie Q is going to sign down here. She's married too. Oops, I spell. Okay. So, and when people ask, why do they need that? You just need to say that's a title question. Okay. They don't, sometimes it might be divorced if it's just one person. It might be single. So whatever their status is, just put that down there. Final acceptance date. Do we fill this out yet?
No.
When do we fill out the final acceptance date?
Signed by both parties and accepted.
Signed by both parties and delivered. Delivered is the key to this one, okay? So you wrote the purchase agreement, you send it over to me. My people are working shifts, so we're not gonna be able to look at this till tomorrow. So we're gonna sign tomorrow. So our date is gonna be different than yours. But then I haven't gotten it back to you till the next day. So whatever date you have received it, all signed, that's final acceptance date. That's a very important date because once you have final acceptance date, then you know that the inspection contingency period starts the next day, okay? So that's an important date. The very bottom part here, 510 to 514, just says, I acknowledge that I've received and had the opportunity to review the disclosure statement, arbitration disclosure, and residential real property arbitration agreement. So are you guys familiar with arbitration? Have you heard of it?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, it's a way to settle disputes should a dispute come up in a transaction, okay? So basically your buyers would sign that, yes, you have shown this to them, and it becomes one of the other pieces you need to put in the packet that you're going to send over to me, part of your offer. Okay, so you're going to want to read that through. And all the buyers and sellers have to sign this wire fraud alert. It's a new document. Basically, they're saying be careful when you're wiring money, okay? You want to confirm the wiring instructions, and there's so many scams out there that you just need to be careful when you're wiring funds. Okay? That's it, you guys. You have written a purchase agreement.
Woo-hoo.
Do you have any questions?
So we can literally write in market rate, the words?
Yep.
Perfect, cool. Hey, good stuff, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Any questions that I haven't talked about? Good, Grady?
That's that.
Okay.
Good to go.
Ready to do it.
Awesome. You know you can reach out anytime, okay? Because when you're starting, man, there's a million questions.
Yeah.
And seriously, I mean, I've been doing this for how many years? Every purchase agreement has stuff that comes up where you're like, oh, I'm not sure. And you find the person who's a little bit further along than you, and you figure out who's dealt with this before. Another great way, you guys, is to get on our Facebook page if you have a question and just type it in. Like a buyer might say, hey, I need a mud jacker. Who's a mud jacker you recommend in town? And see who the other agents would recommend, okay? Or I have a question about buying a farm. Who can I call? And people will pop up and say, hey, yeah, give me a buzz, whatever. So that's a great way to just kind of one place where everybody looks, and you can get some help that you need. So, okay?
Thank you.
Absolutely. Reach out anytime.
Thanks.
Have a good
Okay,
day.
talk to you later. Bye.